This is Mxnzplain. My name is Mxznplain.
I'm Kabelo and the two of us decided to begin this journey of just creating spaces for men to reflect on what it means to be a man in the 21st century. Our task is really to journey with men, listen to different stories, but to create an environment where we can all just learn and grow with each other. It's a journey.
Yep. So if you're interested in mansplaining on their spirituality, their traumas, and all things important about being a man in the 21st century, it's the place for you to come to.
Mxnzplain is for me, for you, it's for all of us. So join in and be part of our journey.
My name is Mxznplain. I'm here with my brother and co-host
Kabelo and welcome to Mxnzplain as always. And like we always say, it is for me, it's for you, it's for all of us. This is Mxnzplain, and today we decided to just have a conversation that is close to heart, that a lot of us like to put out there, but I think we sometimes treat it quite loosely. And that is trying to figure out, what does it mean to be my brother's keeper, right?
Yeah.
So when you say I am my brother's keeper, what are you saying? What does it look like? What is the practice? What is the expectations? So join us today as we try to figure out with you, and hit us up on our comments, YouTube, on Instagram, interact with us, tell us what you think of our show and the content that we're producing and how we can improve it. But most importantly, we want you to be part of this conversation. Exactly. Because it's for all of us.
Exactly. So as we have this conversation, we would encourage you to have it as well in your own circles with your own people. My first question around this thing is, it's our guy, this my brother's keeper thing. Where does it come from, and why is it important?
So I don't know, first, to be honest with you. But I think to be my brother's keeper has always been a concept that I think has been around for quite a while. And I think a big part of it really comes from, I think specifically in schools and in situations where men are in conversation, right?
I think for me, the thing I want to deal with first, that it's our guy, this thing. Like, what is it? Where does it come from, this concept of my brother's keeper?
So I think you just mentioned a few minutes ago when we were chatting that part of the whole statement around am I my brother's keeper is actually a biblical concept, right? But I think there's also been, I guess, media type spaces, and I think books probably around this, and conversations around what does it mean to be my brother's keeper. Okay. And I think for me, what I like the most about it, right, is that it makes the relationship between friends more than just a conversational thing. Okay. Because it comes at the level of responsibility, it comes with a level of I guess, care and intentionality. Okay. So I think for me, when I think of what being my brother's keeper looks like, it is less about the hanging out and the chilling and the good times, right? But it's me being intentional in making sure that I'm aware of, like, as you're my boy, right? I'm aware of your needs, and I'm conscious on to pick up when you're not in a good space, when you're in a great space, but also to focus on the things that matter to you and not just for me, right? Because I think my brother's keeper for me is more about meeting your needs for your sake and not for mine. So it is almost like a selfless type relationship where it is not about me or my gratification, but it's actually more on what does Lebo need that I can provide or contribute towards.
But how would you know that? How would you know what Lebo needs as your brother? Like, what about my relationship with you would give you a sense of, hey, this is my brother whom I should keep, or whom I should be concerned about for him and the things that he needs, essentially.
So I'm going to say when we first met, right? I think and it probably has purpose. When we first met, I think it was one of the events at Tebe, and we were there in conversation, and my initial thought of you was, hey, this guy's awkward, right? I found you a bit offish, and I wasn't sure if you were pretentious or if you were being yourself. So I was trying to figure out, like, who is this guy, right? And then our second encounter was at the Virgin Active in Rosebank cycling. And then we had a bit of a chat, and once again, I was like, who is this guy? And then over time, for whatever reason, I guess God and Badimu decided we were going to be much closer than that, right? And I think we then started talking, and the conversations moved from just like random things about, be it cycling or tebe or culture or art, whatever it may be, but it actually started being about, you know, what is happening in your life, what are the things that you aspire towards, what are the things that you're working towards, and it became an interest, right? Yeah. I even remember I Googled you. I was like, who is this guy? And then I realized, oh, he's doing his PhD, you know. But I think for me, it then became a thing of, I realized that you value consistency. Yeah. Two, you value a very small and almost closed off type circle. Yeah. And your family is like the main thing, right? So just that alone as an example for me is what we're being invited to when we look at the whole concept of being my brother's keeper. Okay. But the conversation, I think, for me goes even deeper, right? And at this point, I actually want you to share about, you were telling me about a safeguard, right, that you have for some of the gents in your life, including myself, right? Where it's like, if you know you're about to mess up, do 1, 2, 3, 4. So part of me is like, that is part of the concept of being your brother's keeper, okay, right? But I want you to explain it in your words and how you got there.
Yeah, I mean, so maybe before I explain that, let me give you a sense of how I think about this brother's keeper concept or conversations. Like, there's an element of it that is, okay, the words themselves, my brother's keeper, right? It's like, okay, this thing is mine. Oh, this brother is my brother, right? Okay. So there's that. So it's something that I own. Then it has to do with someone or people that I consider to be brothers.
Yes.
Right? So the question is, what is that? Like, how do you define a brother? There's a biological brother, then there's a brother, someone that's my friend that I get along with, like you, or my other friends, KP, etc., etc. And then there are people who are like in deep African culture. We are all brothers, effectively, right? So there's that element of it, and that's, when I think about the different worlds that this brother thing lives in. And then keeper, in this sense, is, okay, there are parts of you that I should be willing to take some sort of responsibility for, okay, or accountability for, right? That's really what that sentence means for me. The difficulty part for me around my brother's keeper is that last part, where it's like, okay, like, look at this universe. You're responsible
for this being.
I have to be willing to hold and own some sort of responsibility. Maybe responsibility is the wrong word, right? But it's almost like there's an element of us living life together, where I'm responsible for certain things that have to do with your life, okay, right? Because then if I let go of those things, if we are in a relationship and I'm not aware of what those things are, and I don't actually take the responsibility to be responsible for them, then really am I your brother? Right? So that's the big kind of question, right? And we'll talk about these other things around, like, is there a sense of, or is there a limit to that? Conditional, unconditional love, blah, blah, blah. Right? We'll talk about that. But the litmus test, I guess, that I put together for myself when I think about, is someone, or am I somebody's brother's keeper? Am I someone's keeper, who I consider to be my brother? Like, one is, and it's not perfect, right? It's like, this is how I currently think about things, and I still believe there's probably some improvement or some things that I have to change, because, I don't know if it's an unconditional love kind of thing. So it's a kind of thing where I'm now aware that as humans, we are not infallible. So we're gonna make mistakes, we're gonna do things wrong, number one. Number two, as humans, we're different in the way that we do things, or in the way that we want to approach our lives, right? Especially as Majita. As Majita, we just want different things. But if I've lived such a substantial part of my life with you, and I've called you my brother over time, or as we have been brought together by whatever forces out there in the universe, I have to be willing to say, Kabelo will have his ups and Kabelo will have his downs. There are things about him that I'm going to like and things that I'm not going to like. But I can't let go of this relationship, le Kabelo, right? So what I then do is, one is I have to be deliberate about knowing who you are, for real, for real. Not oh, Kabelo is wearing a nice top, nice sneakers, you know what I mean? Like, there's an element of like, okay, beyond that, what's important to this guy?
Yeah.
Who is this person, right? What's important to you?
Yeah.
Okay, is your family important to you? And if you say, my family is important, what exactly about your family is important to you?
Okay.
Okay, my wife, my kid, blah, 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 my mom, etc., etc. Okay, what is your relationship with yourself? What are you happy with about you, and what are you not happy with about you, and why? Most men don't have that conversation with each other. I don't know if you can tell me that you think, I'm not sure if you can tell me that you know what about me I'm crazy about, like I really, really like, and what about me I don't like. Because we haven't had that conversation. And you and I are pretty close, right? But most, and I would assume it's the same for most people. How can I then hold that position of, oh, okay, I'm willing to be in this guy's corner to help navigate this life thing and be his keeper if I don't really know you?
So I think for me, like so I'm listening to you, right? And I'm just like, it's very tricky, right, to achieve this and do it well.
Okay.
And largely because I think as human beings, there's many layers to us, right? In the sense that the longer you know someone, the more you know about them. And some things we only find out about an individual based on a context or a situation that they're put into, right?
Okay.
You don't know how somebody responds to trauma until you've seen them in a traumatic situation to an extent. Okay. You don't know how someone responds to loss until they have lost something or someone close to them. Then you begin to realize, oh, so this is what happens to this individual in this situation, right?
Okay.
And when that happens again or at a different point, you are slightly ready because of previous experience, right? So I think for me, if we are truly honest about what being a brother's keeper looks like in practice, it is about being intentional in learning and unlearning the things that you like about your friend, and keeping an open mind that you will discover more as you journey, right? Because I think, you are now in your first year of marriage, your first child, and in my mind, I'm like, okay, we will see a very different level in 2-3 years' time, because the dynamic of being a dad to a young boy is going to start showing up in its own ways, right? And I think it shifts your personality, it shifts how you make decisions, it shifts how you make choices. And being your brother's keeper is about keeping tabs on when these shifts happen and making sure that you're somewhat aligned, right?
But what happens when some of those shifts are things you don't agree with?
So that's where, for me, that's where the conversation then comes in, right? Okay. Because if we're truly brothers, then we should be able to have conversations about things that we don't entirely feel comfortable about, right? Okay. I need to be able to give you feedback. I always struggle with friendships where we never tell each other the truth, and it's all just surface level, right? Where I don't entirely call you up and it's like, yo, bruh, hey, last time you did 1, 2, 3, 4, and I didn't like it. Maybe moving forward, consider the following before you act the way you did. Okay. And I think we avoid that because it becomes too intense. And sometimes in certain relationships, that could be almost like it dampens the mood, right? It dampens the mood because it becomes, oh, so now you're policing how I speak, you're policing how I behave. But I think the whole conversation for me is, it is taking that responsibility already. Through your good times, I'm around. Through your bad times, I'm also around. But I will hold you accountable. If you say to me, I want to achieve the following things in the next 5 years, if I'm truly interested and invested in your success, you telling me that is almost you inviting me to hold you liable for what you said you want to achieve. Okay. Right? And constantly checking up is like, yo, dude, you said you're going to do this thing, so how far are you? Right? And sometimes it's just the support to say, hey, I know you've been busy. How are you? Are you okay? Let's grab coffee. Just time to decompress. And I think for me, those are the small little ways of showing care. And I think, male relationships need to start taking more of that form, that it's not just about, let's just, decompress, drink, party, chat, but there's other ways to decompress, right? And part of it is, how's your week been? Like, what are the 5 things that stood out for you? What are the 5 things that really got you down this week? Like, can you pinpoint them? and how did they make you feel?
Yeah, I mean, that's, so I agree with you there. The question that's rising for me based on what you've just said is that if we are to call each other's keepers as brothers, am I accountable for your behavior?
I think you should be.
Why?
Well, I'm starting to learn that that's how it actually is, right?
Okay.
Because previously, it was one of those which is like, sure, Kimpinchaka, but he did that on his own.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, it's like, if I was around, surely I could have said something at that point in time.
Okay.
Or rather, moving forward, now that I'm aware that certain things happen, I need to be able to say to you, oh, dude, remember the last time you did this, this is what happened, right?
Yeah.
And I think for me, that's where the balance actually is that accountability means that whatever decisions I make, somewhat you are liable, right? And I'm not saying liable
by
in the sense
virtue of the fact that we're friends or brothers,
yes,
right?
by virtue of having chosen each other,
Okay.
right? We become part of that decision-making process or error-making process, right?
Okay. Let me just repeat what you've just
yeah.
said, because I think it's important. By virtue of us choosing to be in relationship with each other
Yeah.
and calling ourselves really close friends or brothers, I am somewhat liable for your behavior, even though I didn't do some of the stuff you're doing. By virtue of us being rimpinji.
Yeah.
Okay. That's hectic, because if you think about it,
It's a lot. And I think that's why we all shy away from it.
exactly, right? So now, what do you do then, I guess, in situations where you're like, this is my brother's keeper. This is my brother, and I'm his keeper, right? And your brother goes and does things out there that you found deplorable. How do you then deal with that? Like, how do you elevate? How do you help them deal with those situations? Because they now have their blemish on you, right? If what you've just said is exactly what it is, right? So, bad example.
Yeah.
But it's what we see in society. So, you're married, I'm married. If you find out one day that Lebogang, when he is at home, right? How do you deal with that with me?
Sheesh. So firstly,
don't swear on TV.
No, I won't. No, so when you say,
as an example, right? Of course, I'm not doing that.
I get, and I get you, right. And for me, firstly, I think I'd be deeply disappointed.
Yeah.
And largely because of I think the conversation that we've had one-on-one, and parts of it that you shared on Mxnzplain about how you grew up and the things that you didn't like about a space like that, right? And so for me, if I find out that you're doing that, first and foremost, right, I would directly call your wife. Personally, I'd get them out of the house. And once we've done that, whoever your uncles are, we're going to call them, we're going to sit down, we're going to deal with it.
So you would go beyond me to deal
So
with
for me, it will be a parallel thing,
Okay.
right? I'll be in conversation with you, but whilst I'm chatting to you, I'm also making sure that your wife has the support and the protection that she needs, right? Because I think for me, the idea of being associated with a man that thinks they can beat women, anyone for that matter, doesn't sit well for me, right? Because I completely hate violence, right? I don't think there's a place for it. I think there's many things that we can resolve without lifting our hands, even our voices, to be honest with you. And so for me, that's how I would deal with it, right? Is I think calling you out is not a once-off thing. It's not me sending you a text like, hey, dude, please stop hitting your wife. No. I'll send you a text. We will meet. We will sit down, and we will talk about what it is that is happening and why is it happening, and what makes you think you have the right to behave in that manner.
So now, if you think about part of what you've just said, is you would go beyond me as your brother to help solve the situation. So you directly speak to my wife, find out, kind of sort out something for her, speak to my uncles, family, blah, blah. That would risk our friendship. Would you be willing to take that risk?
So my view is if the cause is worth it, then we need to test the friendship itself, right? Okay. Because if the friendship then does not survive, then it means it was never real, right? If you being held accountable for bad behavior compromises the friendship, then it means you're not willing to reflect.
Okay.
Right? It also means that you're not willing to be held accountable for what you've done, right?
Yeah, but it also, you're assuming same level of maturity, right? When dealing with that kind of issue.
Yeah.
And as part of being brothers or being really close, then you being my keeper or me being your keeper, is also understanding that we're not at the same level of maturity, perhaps, with certain things. Then the question is, like, how do you deal with that? And I'm not, look, by the way, I'm not picking on you. I'm not asking you.
No, I get you. I get you. Yeah.
I don't expect us to have an answer to this that is like clear cut. This is what must happen.
Yeah.
What I do think is important, because what I think some of the things you're saying are really important, is as men, do we go above and beyond to ensure that the relationships that we hold with each other are also relationships where we hold each other responsible. And we are continuously, regardless of how hard it is, are driving each other to our best selves, right? And I deliberately use the kind of GBV example because that's what we see in society.
Yeah.
We've also seen where friends do this and no one says anything to them, right?
Yeah.
The friendship just continues. The friendship just like, that's what is seemingly normal in society, you know? But if we are handling things that way, then are we not, this whole thing, brother's keeper thing, then feels like a lie. It's almost like, oh, I'm my brother's keeper on condition that
they are perfect.
Not necessarily they are perfect, but like there are conditions, right? Like I'm not going to hold him accountable for certain behaviors.
Okay.
That's not for me. Hey, that's for him and his wife, or that's for him and his family. It's like, I think when part of the conversation we had at some point was our partners, or maybe our mothers, our women out there, have thought that men are each other's brothers' keepers, but mostly for things that are negative. That dudes go out and do this. It's like, no,
yes,
because
because I think if you think about it, like take it back as far as school, right? And a lot of those tendencies actually begin as early as our high school years, right? Where a homie will do something in the classroom or in the school, and then they want to find out who did it. But now because of this whole bro code, right? I'm not going to say anything, because if I speak, I'm snitching, and if I'm snitching, then it means I'm not going to be trusted. But it also means that I'm going to be kicked out of the friendship circle, right? So at a very young age, boys specifically learn not to snitch on each other, and that becomes a protective mechanism that we carry into adulthood, right? Is that if I see you behaving in a way that you shouldn't be, instead of calling you out or chatting to somebody that is close to you that could assist you, I see it as, but I can't snitch on my boy, right?
So are you saying you should snitch on your boys?
But it's actually not snitching, right? No, so my thing is this, right? The whole concept of don't snitch, for me, it's very childish, because sometimes I think there's been situations where certain things could have been avoided, but because we believed in this very toxic code of not snitching, people were compromised.
Okay.
And sometimes it comes at the detriment of a person's life or a person's livelihood, right? Whereas if we had actually dealt with it and pointed it out for what it is, the repercussions or the results could have been different, right? So I think there's things that I'm not going to snitch on you for, honestly, I'm not going to snitch on you for buying a pair of sneakers and hiding it in your boot because you don't want to take it into your house for at least 2-3 weeks, right? Because now there's a cooling off period. That for me is like, that's between you and your finances, right? But I think something like you said, beating your partner, there should be no loyalty for me to protect you as my friend if you're doing something like that, right? Because I think that's something that needs to be dealt with and dealt with quick, because we've seen the repercussions of what happens when stuff like that goes undealt with, right? And I think for me, that's probably the culture of why the idea of boys will always protect each other for nonsense comes from, is it's that high school mentality or even primary school mentality of not wanting to snitch.
And it goes into like manhood, right?
Yeah,
like,
we take it into manhood, and I think it takes different forms, right? Yeah. It takes different forms at that level because we're grown, there's more access to certain things, there's a bit of power, there's a bit of access, and so it starts to show itself up differently, right? Like when I look at cases that have been in the public space, right, where gents have misused company money for personal stuff, right, and now it's made big headlines. And when you think about it, you then look at the witnesses, right, and you're just like, the people who've turned state witness are the same people who were chowing the money with the gent, right? And some of his homies were probably right there, right? But
so these are people who were his brothers at that point.
Right, and so his brothers enjoyed the luxury of not snitching because they benefited, I guess, financially or drinks-wise or whatever it may be. And now that you are in hot water, everybody steps back, right?
In an ideal world, what should happen in that situation? If they're really brothers, friends, should they stick by their boy or what? Like, what do you think should be the...
So for me, two things, right, is if, we're friends, right? If I find out that you are embezzling money from your company, the most important thing that needs to happen at that point in time is that me and you have to have a conversation, right? But also that conversation has to go beyond just the two of us, because part of it is that there needs to be a level of accountability to the business itself, right? You would need to tell the people tell your partners or whoever it is to say, hey guys, this is what I've done, and the repercussions that come, you need to fold, right? And I'm going to use an example. So there's a very close friend of mine, had a friend who, committed a massive thing, right? And it was terrible. And what was interesting was when I spoke to this gent, and I was like, so given that you guys are childhood friends, how are you going to deal with this person moving forward? And his response was simple. He was like, look, dude, he's my homie. I don't agree with what he's done. He's messed up. The repercussions have been put on the table. And if it means I must visit him in prison for the next 7 years, I'll show up for him.
Okay.
But I need him to know that I don't agree with what he did, right? And that for me is being your brother's keeper. Is that
so
we don't write someone off. It's like you've been held accountable. And as we're holding you accountable, we will still check up on you because in right? A human being can never be discarded at any point, right? And for me, that's a huge element of being your brother's keeper, right? Is that you can't just throw them away because now they don't fit the profile of who you think you are in society. So now you distance yourself because it's better for your brand. And those are the difficulties about this, right? But I think now for you, when have you seen this brother keeping mission working, right? Any examples, like from your personal experiences at work, at home, wherever it may be?
Bro, like, I think if I use myself as an example, right? So there have been instances in my life where, long ago in my past when I was young and dumb,
weren't we all?
Like I've done things relationship-wise, like where one of my closest friends, like two of my closest friends actually, if I think about it now, our biggest disagreements or fights have been because of things that I did, right? And it all had to do with like girls, like dumb stuff, right? They didn't agree with how I went about things. There's two situations and they both handled it very differently. So the one friend, who's still like a very good friend of mine today, and we're trying to like repair our friendship, thank God. He basically was like, nah, I can't have you around as a friend.
Sure.
To me, right? It was like, I can't do that.
And how did you feel about that?
I think we didn't speak for something like 7 years, but we're in the same circles, right? It broke my heart, to be quite honest. But now, as a grown man, I'm like, I understand why he chose to kind of take that stance. I don't understand why we couldn't sit like this and have a conversation, because that never happened. Because one of those things, as much that we have this like fuck thing.
Yeah.
It's like, I think that's what happened there, right? Because we're both like alpha male, very like
strong-headed.
Yeah. Okay, that's the one example. We're trying to fix it now, thank God. Then there's another friend of mine, very, very close friend of mine. I messed up. I did something he didn't agree with, like deeply in his heart. And I think I broke this guy's heart, actually. his approach was, I'm going to push you away for a little bit, right? You and I are brothers. And he'll initially say like, no, you're my brother.
Yeah.
So I'm going to treat you like my brother. And his concept of brother is like, whether we're biological or not doesn't matter. The minute he says that, that's what we are.
Okay.
He doesn't say it to a lot of people. So pushed me away for a little bit, a couple of months. And you know when you start to notice someone's absence in your life, that was like tough for me.
Yeah.
But he needed the time so that he could process this thing for himself first. And then brought me back in. And I was like, we're going to sit down and we're going to talk through this thing. And he spoke me through the whole thing. And we spoke. You know, we didn't always see eye to eye about the reasoning. I apologized. He apologized. It was tough.
Yeah.
It was tough. Because I consider that guy like, I consider him my blood, you know? The relationship kind of, you know, went through its peaks and troughs, wasn't great. And then I think once for him it hit that this is still the same guy, it's just, you know, made some mistakes. Now we're kind of back to being brothers. But he never abandoned me.
Okay.
I think that's the thing. So that's where it's probably one of my very few examples of like potential unconditional love.
Okay. So you're saying being your brother's keeper?
I don't think
okay.
It's unconditional.
Okay.
That's why I said potential unconditional love.
Okay.
Because the danger for me with unconditional love is I can do anything. And because you have on your head the responsibility of unconditional love, you must love me.
Yeah.
And you must keep relationship with me.
But is unconditional love even a possibility, right? Is it a real thing? And maybe this is a conversation we must do this as an actual topic at some point on the podcast.
Within the context
right.
of this brother's keeper thing, I don't know if the concept of my brother's keeper works without some element of unconditional love. Okay. What that is, I don't know. Because like I've said to you, and it's actually the first time I'm talking about this, is if I look at these two situations, right? The one has an element of unconditional love. And I'll like, that dude is mine. I will die for that guy. But I'll also die for this guy who potentially abandoned me, right? Because as a man now I get why. You know what I mean? It's weird that this is what's happening in this episode, because I've always thought I would look at this brother's keeper thing with other people. Yeah. But if I'm the one who needed to be held accountable, as I have in these situations, I'm actually grateful for the blessing of someone considering me their brother, and then also considering that, hey, that's my guy, and I need to hold him accountable. And you know what? He's not perfect.
Yeah.
Let me be around to have him learn and to be a better person. So there must be an element of unconditional love. It's weird because I didn't agree with this unconditional love initially. Yeah. I did not. I don't think it fully exists.
Okay.
But I would be naive and completely dishonest if I said I wasn't a recipient of something like an unconditional love when I think about these two examples. Which then brings me to, how do you deal with this brother's keeper situation in your own family? When your brother does something to you that is deplorable, or your sister does something to you that you don't agree with, and vice versa, you do something, right? Those are your biological brothers and sisters. Like you don't exist if they don't exist. They don't exist without you. You don't exist without them. How do you then live out this brother's keeper thing?
Sheesh. So that's a bit tricky, right? Specifically for me, because of my half brother, right? You know, and I think we've always had a very strange relationship because we didn't grow up together. I'd see him probably once or twice a year, and even then the relationship like there was never really like serious or deep conversations around anything, quite frankly. So there was never a relationship with him because we didn't grow up in the same house. We were not raised by the same people. He lived in Brits. I lived in Joburg. And I think when I then became much older, the relationship became very transactional, right? He would only call me if he needed money, if he call me if he needed something. But there was never a sense of, you're my brother. There was never a sense of, we share the same mom, right? Whilst on the other hand, the young man that I call my brother, which is actually my cousin, right? Me and Latile technically grew up in the same space, right? We were raised with the same rules, raised, with the same conditions to an extent, right? So it is easier for me to hold him accountable. It is easier for me to go out of my way to, I guess, protect him and try and make sure that he keeps moving forward. Whereas when I look at my relationship with Amogelang, it's very strained because we're related by blood, right? But there's no relationship. So it is hard.
Do you consider Amogelang your brother?
And I think that's the challenge, right? Is that he is my brother by virtue of we share a mom. But apart from that, there's no relationship, right? And as I'm thinking about it now, I'm just like, I think there's a big part of me that's like, I've failed this boy because I'm much older than him. Well, not really. I think I'm 10 years older than him or so, right? And as his older brother, I should have been a bit more proactive in interacting with him and protecting him and journeying with him, right? But I think there was also a part of me mentally that just switched off from protecting this boy. And we're starting to see the repercussions of that, right? Is I think he exists within the family, but very much in an isolated form of a young man, right? And he exists in an isolated form of a young man who technically lacks an older brother, which is me.
Even though he has an older brother.
Right. And to that extent, I've failed him in that regard. And then I look at the relationships that I have with some of my close friends, right? Like Piello is naturally, we've known each other for just over 22 years or so. So for the longest of time, that's my brother, right? Mzwakhe, same thing. Yes, we butt head, all of us, even me and you, right? I butt heads with you, I butt heads with P, I butt heads with Mzwakhe, but at the end of the day, I know that if I call any one of you and I say to you, my house is burning down, regardless of where you are in the world, you will get there, right? And I'm very confident to say that, right? Yeah. If I call any one of you as like, yo, my child needs 1, 2, 3, 4, you guys will figure out how to get it to me, right? But we're not related. Yet that compassion, that empathy, that grace, that strong faith and belief in you guys exists, right? And somebody who I share blood with, because there is no real relationship, it is difficult to offer yourself, right? And I think for me, it's something that I need to work through. It's something that I'm very conscious of. But at the same time, it also comes with the whole thing of, okay, if I extend myself, what's going to come? What will the expectations be? Do I have capacity for that? But at the same time, it becomes one of those, right? You can't be here on Mxnzplain talking about being my brother's keeper when there's a young man who needs, I guess, a positive male role model in my life that I'm not showing up for 100%, right? So it's tricky that, and I think we find it easier sometimes to be a brother's keeper to friends.
It's almost like it's easier in situations that fit our molding.
Yes.
And I guess here the question, the missing issue between you and your brother, who's your real brother, and your other guys like me, is that there's relationship. There's been time spent in building that relationship. So the easy thing for me to say to you now is to, then invest time in building a relationship with your brother.
Naturally.
Especially when it's Hotman.
Yes.
Because there's that thing about Hotman as well. So I'm going to push you for that now. Because me being your brother and partly being your keeper, I would not be doing our relationship any justice and any service if I did not push you to at least try and reach yourself out, right? And at the same time, though, to be fair, you should do the same with me, because I have a biological brother. Me and my brother, like, when we were younger, we grew up in the same home, blah, blah, blah. When we were younger, we were very close, like incredibly close. Now there's a bit of distance, right? But it's just because of, you know? The reason I would want you to push me a bit is because I find it hard because it's you know, I almost feel like with people who are your family, it's harder to accept the stuff that you can't accept from them. It's harder to accept the things you can't accept from your family because they're your family. I don't know if that's fair anymore. Just given this conversation, I don't know if that's fair, you know?
That's what I'm thinking. It's like we've actually set much higher standards for our brothers in terms of what's acceptable and what's not acceptable than we have with each other in our friendships. Which for me then becomes a more reflective thing to say, how do we begin to shift that, right? And I think that whole, what we've just agreed on, right? The pact we've just made now is you're going to try harder to nurture and rebuild a relationship with your brother, and so will I, right? Because I think for me, if we fail to do that, then we might as well shut this whole thing down, right? Because the whole purpose, really. The whole purpose is reconfiguring the idea of a man in society, and if we can't be our brother's keepers, if we cannot be willing to go out of our way, even in situations where it's not palatable and we don't entirely like it or it doesn't fit our mold, then we need to really ask ourselves, what are we doing here? And I think for me, to conclude, right, it would just be a very simple thing, is I think just based on the conversation we've had today, is that to be my brother's keeper is to unconditionally love someone and accept the things that I'm not willing to accept about them, right? And journey with them in a way that reminds them that they're cared for, that they're loved, and that regardless of what they do, they will be held accountable, but they will be loved through it and supported through it, right? Because even when you spoke, I realized that the abandonment from the one friend is something that still hurts you, right? And I think, like any other human being, no one wants to be abandoned, right? Because we belong, we were designed to be in community, we were designed to be in relationship. And so when you abandon someone, there's a part of them that actually dies in that process. So how do we re-energize that with myself? It will be with my relationship with Amo, and with you, it will be with your brother. So yeah, your last words.
I think my encouragement to everyone, especially my Jita that are watching this, is go think about the moments where the world has afforded you some grace when you've messed up in situations and people have not abandoned you. But then also think about where you've abandoned other people in your life that you've thought to be your brothers or your sisters, etc. And it may be important to just to go out there and try and, you know, fix what you can, or to have a conversation. Because as Kabelo said, there's a part of you that dies when people abandon you, but there's also a part of them that dies when you abandon them. And that's not how we build a thriving, strong society as people. Yes, people must not take advantage of you. That's not what we're saying. What we are saying is, you know, we should do our utmost to hold a little bit more grace to the people that we love and the people that have been placed in our lives as our brothers and our sisters. This is Mxnzplain. I'm Lebo.
And I'm Kabelo. Thank you for joining us. And yeah, keep making space and holding space for yourself, and just have that generosity in making sure that you show up for others as someone has showed up for you. This was Mxnzplain.
Pieces.